In 1894, one of Japan's most innovative businessmen was born. Born the son of an inventor, Kiichiro Toyoda was raised around machines. He was fascinated with discovering how things worked, and at an incredibly young age, Toyoda could understand how machines were designed, created, and put into use. His father had created a very successful textile factory, but no one could have predicted what direction his son would have taken the family business to. Fast forward a couple of decades, and Toyoda had created Toyota, a great pioneer in the automobile industry. He would go on to revolutionize the technology behind the mass production of automobiles and become one of the biggest car brands in the world. This is the story of how the son of an inventor was able to transform his family textile factory into an automobile company worth over $282 billion. Kiichiro Toyoda was the son of an inventor. To his father, inventing machines was more important than anything else. His father was in the textile industry and was considered the Thomas Edison of textiles. His father considered his work a priority over his family, which led to a turbulent early childhood for Toyoda. When he was only a few months old, his mother abandoned him and his father, leaving him to grow up in company housing, located at the factories his father worked at. He was raised mostly by his grandparents, but he snuck off to the factory as much as he could to see his dad's work. As a child, he loved to watch the workers design, create, and fix machines all around him. He was fascinated by the machines and grew familiar with how they worked at an incredibly young age. Toyoda was an amazing student. He excelled in all of his classes, and in 1920, he graduated from the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Tokyo Imperial University. After he got this degree, Toyoda stayed at this school for 7 extra months to study law. After his graduation, he moved back to his hometown, Nagoya, to work for his father's company. His father's business was in textile machinery, and Toyoda decided to venture off into the world to learn more about this craft. He traveled to London, San Francisco, and Shanghai to educate himself better on the spinning and weaving industry. He returned to Japan, bursting with ideas, and after getting married to his wife, Hatako Lida, he got to work. One of the main interests Toyoda had learned about on his trip was the automatic loom. Despite his father initially disapproving of the idea, Toyoda set up a factory to begin making them. He figured out improvements he could make that would reduce waste and boost productivity. He also created what was called the just-in-time method, which was a new way to boost productivity on a factory floor. Toyoda quickly established himself as someone who was creative and found solutions for problems. He is famously quoted saying, "Before you say you can't do something, try it." Feeling excited by his own innovation, Toyoda once again ventured out into the world to learn more. During his travels, he learned more about the automobile industry. He was fascinated by what the Americans were able to do with cars, and his passion for machines was ignited. Because he has been around machines his whole life, he was able to look at car parts and engines and understand how they worked and how they were built quickly. Even though the automobile industry was still in its infancy, he was able to predict that it would be very profitable in the future. Upon his return back home, he begged his brother-in-law, who is the current president of the family company, to fund a program to develop automotives. In 1933, Toyota helped create an automobile manufacturing department known as Toyota Motor Corporation. The cars were originally sold under this name, but they soon changed to Toyota. The reason for this change was because Toyota was simpler to ride and required 8 brush strokes, which is considered good luck in Japanese culture. He began his work by buying foreign vehicles and having his workers assemble and reassemble them so they could get a better idea of how they worked and how they could emulate the design. In 1924, Toyota unveiled an experimental gasoline engine to his stockholders and was able to persuade them to fund a larger automotive division. In 1935, Toyota and his team unveiled their first prototype called Model A1. The car was based on design elements from Chevrolet, Ford, and Chrysler. The prototype was a success, but unfortunately, it was not smooth sailing for Toyota in the years ahead. Within the first few years of the creation of Toyota Motor Corporation, the Second Sino-Japanese War began. This war caused major complications and setbacks for the automobile industry in Japan. After the war was over, the Japanese government implemented restrictions on automobile production because they wanted factories to focus on creating products for the military. These rules continued to get more strict for Toyota. Automobile companies had to get personal permission from the Minister of Commerce and Industry to even sell passenger cars. This was a huge setback for Toyota and his plans, and he feared for the future of his company. He still never gave up hope and continues trying to innovate and hope that the restrictions would end. The situation would continue to get worse as time went by. World War II was happening, and at the height of the Pacific Theater, Toyota's family and business would take a major hit. His children were not able to get proper education because of civil ramifications, which was devastating for Toyoda because he was such an academic himself. On top of this, his business had to stop its usual production so it could make trucks for the Imperial Japanese Army. Wartime was brutal, and many businesses were destroyed during this time. Thankfully for Toyoda, all of his family firms were spared destruction just days before the Japanese government would surrender. When World War II was over and Japan accepted the Potsdam Declaration, Japan became occupied by GHQ, General Headquarters. GHQ continued the ban on the creation of passenger vehicles. Toyoda was furious with this and decided he would do all he could to restore his industry. He had a dream and a vision for what the Japanese automobile industry could become, and he saw it being the way that Japan would thrive after the war. He established and became the chair for an official organization for the automotive industry. He used this organization to negotiate with GHQ, and he was able to get them to admit the hypocrisy in their decision. Toyoda spoke at different companies, and his words impressed different representatives. He proved to his country and his industry just how passionate he was about the automobile industry and made himself a leader and a spokesperson for the industry as a whole. While many other companies were giving up and accepting defeat, Toyoda was a leader and fought for the industry's success. Even though his words and perseverance had rallied an industry, he was not completely out of the woods yet. Post-war Japan didn't have the materials and parts needed, and the country was so poor. Toyoda's vision was to create cheap cars of high quality, but the price jumps were making this nearly impossible. In addition, part of the GHQ occupation policy required automobile companies to repair United States military vehicles. This meant that Toyoda had to use his factories to service these vehicles instead of making his own. While this was a setback for Japanese car production, Toyoda used this time to investigate and learn the inner workings of American automobiles. He had his workers investigate every part of the American vehicles and had them take them apart and put them back together again until they fully understood how the trucks worked. They used the advanced parts of American cars as a blueprint for their own designs. Toyoda turned a setback into something that actually progressed his company's development, something only a true genius would think of. Throughout all of the trials and tribulations of Japan during wartime, Toyoda never gave up and continued to push the development of the automobile industry. Toyoda continued his efforts to bring back the automobile industry. In June of 1947, he achieved a small victory when GHQ approved the production of 200 cars a year. This news was very exciting for Toyoda, and he began work right away. It had been years since he was able to produce passenger cars, and he saw this as a shift in the industry. He was finally able to put to work all of the ideas he had dreamed about for the past decade. In October of the same year, only 6 months after the ban was lifted, Japan's first post-war passenger car was unveiled. It was a SA model with an S engine, and the car was nicknamed Toyopet. While the car was a big success for the automobile industry symbolically, it wasn't a success financially. The car was very well made, and the engineering was top-notch, but the citizens of post-war Japan were not looking to buy passenger cars. Even though the Toyopet was considered a great car, the people of Japan had not yet decided that it was necessary to buy a personal vehicle yet. The focus for the Japanese was rebuilding their broken country and restoring it to its former glory. In the first 5 years after the release of Toyopet, 197 units were sold. This number, when compared with the 127,996 trucks that were sold during the same time frame, was not ideal. The second major issue was with the facilities they used to create the passenger vehicles. The machines were in bad shape and had not been maintained well through the war. Things were not looking promising for the future of Toyota cars, and Toyoda was not happy. He began to seriously worry if his cars would be able to compete with foreign cars. Toyoda realized that if his car still couldn't compete with the foreign cars after a few years, he would have to work with the foreign manufacturers. He truly just wanted to make cheap, high-quality cars for his country, but things kept on going wrong. The automobile industry was suffering abroad as well. In 1949, the financial plan known as the Dodge Line went into action in America. The Dodge Line was meant to lower inflation for America post-World War II, but in Japan, inflation worsened greatly. This was largely due to the fact that Japan was spending a lot of money on returning soldiers to Japan, and the government was making withdrawals overseas. Japan was quickly slipping into a recession. The demand for automobiles continues to decline, and the cost to make them continues to rise. Toyoda began to worry about the future of his company. He, alongside the other managers of his company, tried to sell together to recoup money and save for materials. But in the end, they were left with a 22 million yen deficit every month. He was left with no other choice than to make budget cuts. He decided his best course of action would be to cut 10% of wages and cut retirement pay in half for all employees. While his employees were upset, they knew that this was better than being fired. Toyoda promised not to fire any employees because he knew from past experience that a lack of employees would cause more issues internally than just cutting pay. Every day, Toyoda would go to banks to try and get financial help, and eventually, he was successful in his endeavors. He was able to get 188.2 million yen in loans, which helped Toyota overcome bankruptcy. The road to Toyota's success was never easy, and he continuously made sacrifices for the betterment of his company. He had a dream and a vision of what the automobile industry could be for Japan, and his dream only came true because of his perseverance and creativity. He stuck by his company and his industry through hard times, and because of him, Toyota would grow to reach international success. Kiichiro Toyoda passed away in 1952. but his company continued to prosper and expand. After his death, he was awarded the 4th Class Order of the Sacred Treasure and the junior grade of the 5th Rank of Honor by the Japanese government. 14 years after his death, Toyota would go on to create a compact car called the Toyota Corolla. It was a huge success and went on to become the best-selling car of all time. The plans that Toyota had envisioned for small, efficient, and cheap cars paid off big during the oil crisis of the 1970s, when the need for fuel-efficient vehicles was huge. Following the success of the Corolla, Toyota released the Camry compact car and the 4Runner sports utility vehicle. The company also created a luxury car line called Lexus. In 1989, Toyota continued its innovation and designed the first mass-produced hybrid vehicle, the Prius. The rise of Toyota was undeniable. In 2008, Toyota sold 8.97 million vehicles, which put them ahead of the American giant General Motors, which had held the record for the past 70-plus years. Toyoda's legacy will forever live on through his incredible business and the innovation he created in the automobile industry.